From the Delhi studios of Republic TV, it's time for The Debate.
The Debate at 10.
Presented by Berger Easy Clean. Powered by Reva University, Quick Heal Secrite, Green Lamb Laminates, PolicyBazaar.com,
And
Cucina. Co-powered by Mankind Pharma
and
New Nexon.
Welcome back, friends. Ladies and gentlemen, the Israel-Hamas war is at an inflection point now, with calls being made for ceasefire, something that Israel has outrightly denied. We have seen how Israel responded to comments coming in from United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, for example. In fact, Israel has sought his resignation for the position he has taken. But then we have seen many capitals in Europe, for example, in Iceland, in Spain, even some elements in London getting edgy about the manner in which Israel has gone all out against smoking out Hamas and its military infrastructure in northern Gaza Strip. But then it seems that liberal left is exerting its influence and pressures on those respective governments. But we have seen statements coming in asking for restraint on Israel, even ceasefire. Rishi Sunak, UK Prime Minister, came under pressure from the opposition benches when he remarked today that not ceasefire, but then still we need some sporadic breaks so that humanitarian aid can go to Gaza Strip, which obviously it should. But then does it give the Hamas organization, the terrorists, time to regroup, time to take breathers? Because remember, we are seeing day in and day out, not a single day passes when the relentless rocket attacks from Hamas-controlled areas in Gaza Strip continues, which means they still have ammunition, they still have firepower. And remember, Israel already is facing an onslaught from multiple fronts, from the Hezbollah in Lebanon. In fact, there was a meeting that took place today between the leaderships of Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, and Iranians, trying to escalate the situation and make it difficult for Israel to go ahead with its ground offensive that it has planned for some days and not been able to carry out except for some sporadic raids to check how the infrastructure is working for the Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Let's look at this report and see how the debate is placed, and then we come back with an international panel of guests.
We are in one of the forward locations in the south of the Israel, and here the preparations are in full swing. How the troops are preparing for the ground battles. The tanks have been installed. The big Merkavas are here on the ground to totally wipe out the Hamas terrorists, and so does the regular briefings of the soldiers that are taking place here at the ground zero.
इजराइल की जमीन पर रोज ऐसे कम से कम 200-400 रॉकेट दागे जा रहे हैं। आयरन डोम उन्हें लगातार इंटरसेप्ट कर रहा है, उन्हें निष्क्रिय कर रहा है, लेकिन बावजूद इसके जो रॉकेट बच जाते हैं वो इस तरह की तबाही मचाते हैं, इतना भीषण नुकसान करते हैं। और इसीलिए करीब 1400 लोगों की इजराइल में मौत हुई है इसी जानलेवा रॉकेट की वजह से। और हमास लगातार जैसे ही शाम ढलती है रॉकेट दागे जाने का सिलसिला तेज हो जाता है, और ये तड़के सुबह भोर में 4 या 5 बजे तक चलता है। तस्वीरें भयावह हैं, तस्वीरें डराने वाली हैं, लेकिन हमास अभी भी थमने का नाम नहीं ले रहा है।
الو يابا ابا انا قاعد بكلمك من جوبا بسيم. افتح الواتس تبعه قول له وين، شوف كيف القتله، شوف كيف قتلك فيديو يابا، ابنك قتل يهود. هاي دخلوا بسيم يابا. الله اكبر، ربنا يحميك يا رب. يابا انا جوبا بسيم يابا، يابا والله 10 قتلت، 10 فيديو يابا. يابا على ايدي، اعطيني امي، اعطيني امي. يما يما يحميك يما، طول الليل 10 فيديو يما، طول الليل 10 يما فيديو قتلت. ربنا يرحمك بالسلام.
Despite the terror-proof, United Nations has taken a pro-Hamas stand on global platform.
It is important to also recognize the attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. The Palestinian people have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation. They have seen their land steadily devoured by settlements and plagued by violence, their economy stifled, their people displaced, and their homes demolished.
Israel is fuming over UN batting for terrorists.
But the UN is failing. The UN is failing, and you, Mr. Secretary General, have lost all morality and impartiality. Because when you say those terrible words that these heinous attacks did not happen in a vacuum, you are tolerating terrorism. And by tolerating terrorism, you are justifying terrorism.
The world is sharply divided on Israel war. The US and UK back Israel's stand of no ceasefire.
Mr. Speaker, from the start, we have said that the first and most important principle is that Israel has the right to defend itself under international law. Our support for that position is absolute and unchanged.
And as I think you've heard us say, a ceasefire right now really only benefits Hamas. That's where we are right now. And I understand the question, but I'm just not going to get ahead of where things are.
Turkey president has referred to Hamas as warriors.
Are bombing the cities and hospitals and the shrines and the mosques and the bazaars and the houses with their tanks, with their weapons and arms. They are carrying out this humane attacks. I wonder there are any other army or any other state.
In a polarized world, Israel has a message.
The West is next. The West is next. The wall which was imposed on us, there is no side. This wall was imposed on us. Is not only Israel's wall. It is the wall of the free world.
Is Israel's war becoming global war now? Let's debate.
All right, welcome back, friends. Is a ceasefire being asked for with a threat that if it does not happen, there is likelihood of escalation to a level where there might be a regional war or even a global war? That's what we are discussing. Joining me on this conversation, Major General G.D. Bakshi, defense expert. He's joining us live from Delhi. We also have Terry Newman, Israeli entrepreneur, live from Tel Aviv, and Avishag Avi. She's an Israeli journalist. She's joining us live from Ashkelon in Israel. Ashkelon is one of the towns which was directly affected by the October 7 Hamas terror attack. Charles A. Kupchan, Senior Fellow Counsel on Foreign Relations and Professor of International Affairs, Georgetown University. He's joining us live from Washington, D.C. We also have Rich Outzen, again from the United States. He's a retired colonel of the U.S. Army and former senior advisor to the State Department. He's in fact joining us live from Berkeley, Virginia. We also have Tatiana Kukareva. She's a senior journalist joining us live from Moscow to give us how Russia is seeing the latest developments. And then we also have Dr. Saeed Elahi, political analyst, joining us live from Islamabad. And Dr. Hakime Biria, professor from University of Tehran. Hopefully we'll get some clarity on where Iran really stands in this crisis, amidst all the charges that are coming Iran's way from the Israelis. But I want to begin with Andrew K.P. Leung, international independent China strategist. He's joining us live from Hong Kong. Not, someone whom our viewers don't know, Mr. Leung, but what I want to begin by asking you is that is the ceasefire being asked for at or with the threat from some elements that if ceasefire does not happen, if Israel does not pull back from its offensive or counter-offensive against Hamas in Gaza Strip, then this can escalate and it can become a world war. So in a way, an escalation leading to a global war situation is being used as a threat to intimidate Israel to pull back and not take out the Hamas terror infrastructure. Mr. Loong, I think you're not getting me. Mr. Loong, are you able to hear me, Mr. Loong? My question was, yes. My question was, is Israel being intimidated with the possibility of escalation and a global war to pull back from its counter-offensive in Hamas territories? I think he can hear me, but there is some... Mr. Loong, can you unmute yourself? You're speaking, but we can't hear you. Okay, let me take this to Tatiana Kukareva from Moscow. Tatiana, you know, Russia has so far been Russia has taken a very nuanced position on this. You don't want to be seen to be openly anti-Israel, but then you also want to be, you know, to be seen with the side of Palestine. But the difference between Palestine and Hamas has to be there. In that backdrop, for many international capitals, for many elements within Europe, to be asking for ceasefire when Israel has resolved to take out Hamas military infrastructure, how right really is it? How right really is it, Tatiana?
Well, look, I think that the position that Russia has taken is a very clear one, and it's the only one that is sensible in this situation, because we need to understand just how many people are dying in this conflict. And I'm not just talking about Gaza. I'm talking about people in Ashkelon, like my colleague who is present with us, who are still running to bomb shelters on a daily basis. I'm talking about babies that are staying in shelters on the other side. I'm talking about small children dying in Gaza. This has to stop. There has to be a ceasefire, and Russia has called for it repeatedly. So, but let's not forget that today, I think that is today, that the UN Security Council will vote on two, let's call it rival resolutions. And the Russian one calls for clear ceasefire. It does call to condemn the Hamas attack on the 7th this time around, but it also calls to stop and to condemn indiscriminate bombing of civilians in Gaza.
Is that right, really? Is that right, really, Tatiana? Is that really right? Because in that case, you are denying Israel the right. You are denying Israel. You are denying Israel. Israel has clearly said the civilians have no business being there. They have given enough time. It's been about a week that evacuation pamphlets were distributed. Instructions were given that civilians need to leave northern Gaza Strip so that the Hamas infrastructure, the tunnels, and the fact, Tatiana, that I mentioned that even today, hundreds of rockets are being fired from the Hamas-controlled territory shows that the infrastructure is intact, despite all the bombing that has taken place. So obviously, like it has happened in Ukraine, Tatiana, if I could say, that there would be a collateral damage in war. Unfortunately, the fog of war is such that you can't do much about it. But then the fact is, and I want to let's get the debate going. You know, let me go to Dr. Hakime Biria now. You see, there is this Iran factor. In Beirut today, Ms. Biria, there was this meeting that took place between the leaderships of Hezbollah, of Hamas, of Islamic Jihad. And the objective was to widen the conflict, to take the war up north from Gaza Strip. So obviously, all the homilies, all the talk of ceasefire, all the talk of restraint is only for one side, for Israel. Nobody is talking about what to do with this kind of provocation that's coming in.
Before we talk about the escalation
Professor
of the
Berry, are you
global
getting
war, I think we have to talk about. Yes, do you have my voice? We have to talk about a global war of conscience that is going on around the world, and we are seeing that here today as well. There is a global war of conscience. That is, if this is a war, then wars have rules. Is Israel party to the international community? If it is, and Israel claims to be, then it has to follow the rules. There are rules there that says genocide in times of war are not accepted. And if it is not enough to say that there is going to be collateral damage, and that is something that cannot be basically avoided. Israel has every right to do anything and everything in its power upon the people of Gaza. People of Gaza are without enough food, without enough medicine, without enough water, and they are, being bombarded several times a day. They are giving, giving martyrs. Hundreds of them every day. So that it's not fair to say that this is a war, but we are not going to play by the rules of war. If this is a war, then we have a convention called Convention Against Genocide, the International Convention Against Genocide, to which many countries, including Israel, became parties in 1949. And of course, it's a historical satire that Israel in 1950 ratified the convention. But then, of course, everyone knows that it carried out many massacres at the beginning of its, existence. But then it's interesting to note that the United States kept its ratification for 40 years. So I am saying that if we are talking about,
I'm afraid,
if we are concerned as people who are, experts in international relations or other aspects related to it, and if we are concerned about a global war, an escalation of a global war, and we are not giving one party the right to defend itself, and we are giving every right to another party to do anything in its power against a whole population of 2 million people, I think that's not right. We have to talk about a global war of conscience. Are we ready to do that?
Ms. Birya, this is a global war against terrorism. This is a global war against terrorism. I think you are very wrongly, perhaps, legitimizing Hamas. Hamas does not represent the true will of the Palestinians. It's a terror organization, and maybe because Iran is a party. And by the way, all this talk of escalation is only coming from one side, perhaps, and that's Iran. Unfortunately, Saudi Arabia is not going to pick up arms. In fact, it's believed, perhaps rightly, that Iran incited Hamas in some ways to carry out the October 7 attack because Iran was very, very uncomfortable with the possibility of Abraham II Accords happening between Israel and Saudi Arabia. And so to rock the boat, essentially, this was carried out, perhaps with the blessings of China. And I'll go to Andrew Peel, KP Lungo on that. But before that, let me get my American guest because we have got the Iranian view. So because I'm told Rich Outgen has to leave early as well. Rich, the fact that we are still seeing hundreds of rockets coming in from the Hamas territories towards Israel, right up to Tel Aviv, and that's some distance. It clearly shows that despite all the bombing of terror infrastructure that has been carried out, Hamas still has the capacity. So this talk of ceasefire is premature, and the talk of ceasefire essentially incapacitates Israel's war in terms of making sure that a repeat of October 7 does not happen.
Yes, that's right. To be fair, I have great sympathy for the Palestinian people. I actually spent a year of my life helping to train Palestinian security forces that were being trained to work to protect their people and to live alongside Israel in peace in pursuit of a two-state solution. And I mourn the fact that two-state solution apparently has no progress or traction here. But the difference is that the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian people, the overwhelming majority of them, in my view, want a future for their children that involves a state at peace with Israel. That is not what Hamas wants. Its charter is built upon war against Israel. Its attacks on October 7th were some of the most bloody, vicious terror attacks, not resistance, not war, but terror attacks that the world has seen in recent decades. So while I support calls and very, I should say, very gratified to hear Tatiana, with whom I've been on the show before, develop a sudden humanitarian impulse to defend civilians. That's great. I hope that gets applied by the Russians in Ukraine as well. But I would say that in the case of protecting Palestinians, the best medicine for this is to remove the terror group that is currently running the Gaza Strip. And until Israel is able to take, and again, I take war crimes very seriously as a military man myself, Israel has to do more even than it has so far to protect civilians during the strikes it is taking. But make no mistake, they have a right to end Hamas rule, terrorist rule, over the Gaza Strip. And until that is done, there will be no peace for the Palestinian people. Not because Israel doesn't want it. Israel has tried an economic peace. They've tried 8,000 visas for Palestinian workers to come from Gaza to Israel, and they were rewarded with these terror attacks of October 7th, and as you've rightly noted, with the help of Iran, who has provided material and strategic support and encouraged Hamas to take these steps, as well as Hezbollah. They are in a state of war, Iran is, through their proxies with Israel. So yes, it is premature. Yeah. And for those people who want peace and want to protect the future of Palestinians, they need to allow Israel to take care of this problem.
All right. In fact, our Iranian friends, believe that Hamas should be allowed an equal right of defense. I don't know with what logic, but I'm told Dr. Syed Elahi also has to go. But before I come to him, I'll go to Professor Kopchan from Georgetown University. Professor Kopchan, you heard our Russian guest, Tatiana, and you also heard the Iranian view with Dr. Beria. Now, my question is that is the position that Russia is taking, the position that China is taking, is guided more by what the Americans are doing, or in a way, the position is guided by the fact that Israel happens to be a permanent ally of the United States. So in a way, Russia and China are getting back at the US, and in doing so, they are not sensitive to the fact that this is a war against terror, where the global community for once should have united. But unfortunately, it is not.
I would agree with that assessment. And as far as we know, neither Russia nor China was behind this attack. It doesn't look like there was pre-planning and no early warning to the Chinese or the Russians that this terror attack on October 7 was going to happen. But I think both China and Russia are behaving irresponsibly. Both of them know that we live in a world in which this kind of terrorism needs to be eradicated. But instead of siding with Israel, they are taking advantage of the situation to try to appeal to the global South, try to use an inflamed international landscape to appear to be on the side of those who carried out this attack. And so I think it's an irresponsible position to take. I share Rich's view that Israel has a right and reason to continue this campaign until it has destroyed and defanged Hamas. And as we've noted in the show already, the missiles are continuing to fall, and it may well take a ground campaign to go in and remove the tunnels, the missiles, the arms depots that the Hamas has built over the years. And so I think the Russians and the Chinese are behaving irresponsibly here. It is part of this broader division in the global system that we have seen since Russia invaded Ukraine and Beijing has lent its support to Putin.
Okay. Tatiana is not really amused, and I'll come to go to her. But before that, I want to get Major G.D. Bakshi and Dr. Elahi, and the second part of the debate, I'll go to Israel, and then we'll take it forward from there. But before that, since General Bakshi and Dr. Elahi on the screen, General Bakshi, this is essentially a war against terror, and it's unfortunate that despite the United States having suffered such a big terror attack on 9/11, and subsequently we have seen increasing number of sporadic terror attacks happening across much of Europe, India going through its 26/11 and Uri and whatnot. Unfortunately, General Bakshi, the world refuses to even come to a unanimous definition of terror, which makes organizations like Hamas, terror networks like Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed somehow survive in the interstices of this indecisiveness shown by the world community.
Well, there is certainly a lot of hypocrisy as far as terrorism is concerned. When terrorism is directed against certain set of people, there is a outrage and outcry in the Western media. When it is directed at other people, there is a tendency to look the other way, which is very unfortunate. The UN Resolution 1967 very clearly stated that no cause in the world justifies the use of terror. Apropos the aspect of whether Israel should ask for a ceasefire or should agree to a ceasefire on humanitarian grounds to avoid collateral damage to the civilian population of Gaza, as a military man, I would say that 300 rockets were fired in the past 2 days from the Gaza Strip onto Tel Aviv, the national capital. Which country, which armed forces can take the decision to call off operations when such attacks are continuing? The Israelis have suffered 1,400 killed, 3,700 wounded. With a population of just about 10 million, that is about 10 times what the United States suffered in 9/11. It's much more than what we suffered in the Mumbai 26/11 attacks. So, to say Israel should now take the sole responsibility of avoiding collateral damage, well, they are trying to tell people to get out of the area of operations. They have given, as you said, 7 days, over a week for them the civilian population to evacuate so that they are not caught in the line of fire. But unfortunately, we have found a tendency on the part of Hamas to use the civilians as shields. Hospitals, mosques and schools as shields, which is very unfair.
And not the first time.
And I would like to just conclude by saying that Hamas is not Palestine. Hamas does not represent Palestine. They are doing a lot of damage to the Palestinian cause.
Absolutely not unlike what Jaish-e-Mohammed does, Dr. Elahi. Using a madrasa, which is a seat of education, to create a terror infrastructure, which was thankfully bombed by India in Balakot. Dr. Elahi, this is not the first time that Hamas is using civilians as cannon fodder, civilians as shield, hospitals as a front for launching rocket attacks. And you think that there should be ceasefire? What kind of equalization are you looking at? Is this even honest, Dr. Elahi?
Thank you very much for inviting me to your show. And also thank you for giving reasonable time to all participants. First of all, you asked 3 questions. I'll reply quickly. One is that Pakistani government doesn't recognize Hamas. They recognize Palestinian Authority. That's all, number 1. Number 2, Hamas has done a wrong thing by attacking Israel. But on the same time, Israel has broken all the records of barbarism and human rights violation. As you said, it was act of terrorism, but in reaction, Israel is also doing terrorism. And as a Pakistani and our country, we don't recognize Israel. And we think Israel is an illegal, illegitimate, and a terrorist state who is involved in human rights violation from years, from decades.
Israel is a terrorist state?
It is a terror state who
Israel
has committed human rights crimes
Pakistan
against
represents missionaries
Palestinians.
of charity of Mother Teresa.
They they have committed
Israel is a
human
terrorist
rights
state and
crimes
Hamas
against
represents
violation.
missionaries
I
of
agree
charity
with
of
you.
Mother Teresa.
I don't protect or defend Hamas, but I'm talking about Israel. That Israel has broken all the records
We are
of
talking
human
only about
rights
Hamas.
violations. Hamas
All
is, I
sympathies
said,
for
we
the poor
don't support
Palestinians who are
Hamas
being used
at
as
all.
cannon fodder by the
We
Hamas
condemn
terrorists.
their attack. We condemn them, but at the same time, Israel is doing the same thing.
Very good.
What Hamas is doing, they are bombing innocent people, killing innocent people, and stopping medicine, water, food, and all supplies to Gaza. It is inhuman. Channels have said it is a
By the
war.
way-
In war, there are some
By the way-
principles.
Yeah, okay.
In
By
that
the way,
principle
it
is
India,
that
which
if
is
you
one of
make
the
a
first countries
ceasefire,
sending
provide food, water, and medicines to the innocent citizens. That's all.
All right, all right, all right. By the way, it is India which has sent, which is one of the first countries to be sending humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza Strip who are being, or civilians of Gaza Strip rather, who are being used as cannon fodder by the Hamas terrorists. But then, because you accused Israel of being a terrorist state, Dr. Elahi, unfortunate that it's Pakistan
We don't even
which
recognize
follows
Israel even.
terrorist
You know
state
that
policy,
Pakistan is
but
among
then
those
you have
countries.
the balls to really abuse. But we have guests from Israel. Let me go to them.
This
Let
is
me go to
our
them.
national policy. We don't recognize Israel as a state even.
Okay. But you called Israel a terrorist state. I'm going to Avishag.
Yes, sure.
Avishag,
I stand with my words.
We have.
And we stand tall with Palestinians
Okay, so
also.
let's get the answer. Let's get the answer. Avishag, you know, you are being called a terrorist state by our Pakistani guest. How unfortunate is that? But then, please tell us what situation you are going through before we go on to discuss whether Israel should actually be thinking of ceasefire at all. Please tell us what you are going through in Ashkelon as of now.
Before I'll start sharing what we are going through here in Israel and in Ashkelon specifically, I'd like to quote Martin Luther King after all the hideous things that I just heard. And that quote goes like that: "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than a sincere ignorance and consciousness stupidity." And this is exactly what is being talked before in this show. The people that were talked before me, not all of them, but some of them, they basically, what they're doing, they inciting the people around the world with false information, false facts. They actually distorting the facts, changing them to their benefits in order to create a massive world hate against the only Jewish state, which is Israel. So this is about what has been said until now. About the Pakistani guy, which is funny that he's saying that we are a terrorist state coming from one of the, I think, the major after Iran countries that fund terrorism and is a home base for many terror organizations. I think it's hilarious and it's funny, and I'm not going to even give it any attention. You know what? I'll ask him. I'll ask him one question. Okay, does any in the history of Israel or before predate the time of Israel, any terror attack recorded? Okay, in history of an Israeli guy going into a cafe, into a club, okay, and just exploding himself and killing alongside the rest of the people, or buses during the Oslo Accord. Any record except one in Hebron, which all of the Israeli leadership and Israeli population specifically condemn this heinous act that he did in Hebron at the Abraham grave. So you need to look at the different culture and at the different acts of both people, which is something that many sides, including Russia, including the Muslim world, is trying to cover up, is trying to distort, is trying to use it to in order to create propaganda. which is eventually leads to a massive anti-Semitism worldwide. And we can see it in universities around the world. We can see it in the brainwashed Muslim mob in London, in Los Angeles, in New York, etc. You can see it. And not only we are seeing it, also even lefties that I got to know, lefties across the world, they look at their reaction, their behavior to this attack, this massacre that occurred here, and they are absolutely stunned and shocked that they actually stood side by side with them so many years. Their eyes are being opened right now, and I get many questions, and many people address me that the conflict it's not that it was important to them, and they're starting to really investigating history and learning history. This is a topic that they found very interesting now to learn out of the explosion of racism and anti-Semitism among the Islamic communities and their supporters around the world.
Avishag, before we get to the discussion of left, progressive, woke, liberal movement, peace activists, so on and so forth, I want you and Dr. Birya to be on air together, share the screen. And I want to ask Dr. Birya from Iran, Israel versus Iran, on air. I want to ask Dr. Birya, if Palestinians want freedom or a dignity that they deserve, if the Palestinians want a viable Palestinian state for which they have been fighting, where is the Palestinian movement's Martin Luther King? Where is the Palestinian movement's Nelson Mandela? Where is the Palestinian movement's Mahatma Gandhi? No, there is none. Palestinians have not made any effort towards peace if Hamas is what represents them. Dr. Birya.
Yes. It's okay to frame the whole issue around war on terror, and you are free to do that. Of course, the whole show has been that. But I want to bring in another person who is not a Muslim, who's an Israeli Jew, Dr. Jeff Halper. And I want to advise your audience to go and read his book. This is one of the Martin Luther Kings of Israel. He is an Israeli-American anthropologist, author, lecturer, and political activist who has lived in Israel since 1973. And he has written a book a couple of years ago on decolonizing Israel, liberating Palestine. That is what has to happen here. We have to be able to frame what is happening differently, There are people in Israel who are saying what is happening there is settler colonialism. It's apartheid. If these kind of people who are not Muslim, who are Jewish Israeli people, were listened to before, of course we would have a different conversation today. Do
you even see the irony, Dr. Birya?
If you are looking for Martin Luther King,
do you even see the irony, Dr. Birya?
In Israel right now.
I asked for
he has written this book with
Dr. Birya, I asked for a Nelson Mandela.
50 Palestinians. Yes. This
Dr. Birya,
Dr.
look at the irony.
Has written
you
his
missed
book
the irony there.
With the collaboration of 50 Palestinians.
Dr.
So
Birya,
there are Palestinians around the world.
Please, let me
tell you who this Palestinian Martin Luther Kings are. Can I tell you that? Go and read Human Rights Watch's report on a threshold past about the state of Israeli apartheid. A Palestinian person wrote that. There are Palestinians around the world, not just in Gaza, which has turned into the biggest open-air prison in the world.
Dr. Birya, Dr. Birya.
We have
Dr. Birya, look at the irony. Look at the irony that you had to. When I asked for a Palestinian Nelson Mandela, you gave me example of an Israeli Jew, and that's the unfortunate part of it. But then I'll continue this conversation. I will take a quick 30-second short break. 30 seconds, and I'm coming back.
US and THE, the world's foremost university rankings organizations, have ranked Amity amongst the top 3% universities globally, making it among the very few Indian universities to be included in both rankings. Yet another top ranking for Amity University.
All right, welcome back, viewers, and our panel continues, and I would want a little more engaging conversations with Dr. Birya and our Israeli guests. But Terry Newman, he has been patiently listening to the conversation. He's an Israeli entrepreneur. He's joining us live from Tel Aviv. I have to ask a question before I go back to Moscow and Tehran. There was a statement on behalf of Israel-based progressives and peace activists regarding debates over recent events in our region. They did not even have the courage to say that regarding debates over Hamas terror attack, but that's how, unfortunately, progressives, liberals can get foggy. So their statement was essentially about their concern by the inadequate response from certain American and European progressives regarding the targeting of Israeli civilians by Hamas, a response which reflects a disturbing trend global left's political culture. See, even the Israeli progressives and liberals have realized that when they are victims, the woke liberal left, particularly in Europe, behaves in a very strange way. Terry, you think that this is an opportunity for everyone in Israel, in Europe, in the United States, in Americas, to see to use a strong word, see the stupidity with which the liberal left has really read the situation?
Yes, so thank you and good evening. I think there has been a massive misframing of this entire discussion, and I say this with the greatest of respect. Hamas did not attack Israel on 10/7. Iran attacked Israel on 10/7. Iran attacked from the south with Houthis from Yemen, from the center with Hamas, and from the north with Hezbollah. It just so happened that Hamas were the most successful, but the attacks happened on 3 different fronts at the same time, and in all of them they were using Iranian weapons and were Iranian trained. This is an Iranian attack on the state of Israel. Number one. Number two, it's very proper that this is actually a discussion on Indian television with the hashtag Israel Global War, because India is a major part of this story. You may ask, why did Iran suddenly attack Israel on 3 fronts now? And it is linked to the meeting of the G20 that was held in India at the start of September. That was when it was decided to officially start the Indian, Middle Eastern, European corridor, the largest infrastructure project that the free world has ever taken on. And the key to that project is normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel, because it is the train tracks that will link up India to the Middle East and to Europe. And this, they tried to stop this once, the Chinese, by doing a peace treaty that you might remember 6 months ago between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And everybody asked, where did that come from? And then it disappeared. And then after the IMEC, which is the biggest threat to the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI, okay, a month later, all of a sudden, Iran gets permission or decides to attack Israel on 3 fronts, from the north, from the south, and from the center. And therefore, all discussions about ceasefires are just irrelevant. There is a reason why America has bought 2 aircraft carriers, its toughest aircraft carriers to next to Israel. They already have a base in Bahrain. There's a reason why the British are sending warships. Okay, so when you have hashtag Israel Global War, this is what we are talking about. So please don't talk to me about, how bad was Hamas's, attack. This is something far larger going on here. Okay, Israel is under attack. If you know, in addition to the missiles, in addition to 10 Hamas terrorists that broke in again yesterday via sea to Israel's central populated area, there is non-stop bombardment from the north. And we are using, at the moment, American warships are intercepting cruise missiles being sent, Iranian cruise missiles being sent from Yemen. So I think we all need to wake up, think very carefully about what's going on here, and really calm this situation down because it is immensely, immensely dangerous.
All right.
This is
that was
what we're
spoken with
talking
some
about.
clarity, and I think I have to take this to Tatiana. Tatiana would want to respond. Tatiana, I'll just frame the question for you. The fact of the matter is that without actually, making an accusation, there is a series of events which sort of connects the dots. And the series of events is that India, Middle East, Europe corridor gets conceptualized on the sidelines of G20, which, by the way, unfortunately, both President Putin of Russia and President Xi Jinping of China could not attend. You have reports of meetings of Hamas leaders with Iranian leadership. In fact, we have seen Chinese indulgence with Hamas. We know for a fact that China, in the Thucydides trap, that it is in the United States, with the United States, sort of sees an opportunity to find a toehold in a very strategic space called Middle East if the United States position gets compromised. Russia, for whatever has happened in the last 1.5 years, and little unfortunate that it has gone on for so long with the war in Ukraine, finds itself increasingly toeing the line of China. So, who's being rational in this theater of war? At least one side has to realize, or actually all sides have to realize, that this does not help anyone. You can't be taking your traditional anti-West position, pro-China position, and not see that this is global fight against terror. Tatiana.
Well, Abhishek, I think that it is interesting that you say that in a war, one side has to be rational, whereas first and foremost,
I said all sides.
All sides have to be rational. Then I completely agree with my Tel Avivian counterpart that all sides need to wake up and understand exactly how serious that is. And this is exactly what I started with, that we need to understand that this escalation, however beneficial it is to specific parties involved in it, is risking an entirely different scale of a conflict. We were talking for 1.5 years, and I love that you and my darling American counterparts are working Ukraine into the conversation, but we've been talking here for 1.5 years of a global war that is going to come out of Ukraine. There have been talks of a nuclear conflict that is going to come out of Ukraine. I've heard countless accusations and insults, frankly, to our army saying that, look, you're not doing this war right. Well, look, we're now seeing exactly what you can be perceived as right by the West, for instance, razing Gaza to the ground, which does not help. And I can't stress it enough, it does not help to fight terrorism because, as you rightfully pointed out, the rockets are still flying. That means that Hamas have found a way to launch those rockets regardless of Israeli strikes. And we have two powers, And let me remind you
what's the argument
that
there?
if we're talking about a global
should we allow them to continue to do that?
Should we allow Israel to continue bombing? Well,
should we allow Hamas to continue to carry out those rocket attacks?
We need to understand just how.
I think the right question. Sorry, the right question should be if we should allow Hamas keep the hostages first. This is the first question we need to ask before asking from Israel to stop to have a ceasefire. First, release the hostages. Don't ask anything from Israel after what they've done in October 7th.
But you can kill the hostages.
Nothing.
You can kill the hostages in those strikes. They can die in those strikes. We know exactly how Hamas is leading warfare. We've seen this for years.
Tatiana, you know, if the ceasefire happens to the extent that the hostages are allowed to be sent back, you think that's game, that's deal. But, you know, more importantly, Tatiana, I want to give you the ideological basis. You know, we are friends of Moscow. India is friends of Moscow. I'm your friend. And there was, or there is, an ideological basis to Russia's war in Ukraine, or the special military operation, as you call, which is that Kiev is the mother of Russian cities. That the heart of, so the heart of Russia is Kiev, is the territory which is in possession of Ukraine. That's the ideological basis. In that sense,
no.
Isn't the old Jerusalem the ideological basis of Israel? Isn't the promised land to Moses, which was called Canaan, which was called Judah and Sumeria, the ideological basis of Israel? If your ideological basis is right, isn't the ideological basis of the existence of Israel right? Unfortunately, I really ran out of time. I would have wanted this conversation to go ahead and wanted my Iranian friend from Tehran to join that. But maybe next time we will do whether the ideological basis of Israel is something for which it should exist or not. And Hamas, of course, does not stand for existence of Israel. On that note, thank you so much, friends, for joining us on this interesting conversation. Israel's war against terror is global war against terror. Hopefully it would be taken to logical conclusion. Of course, keeping in mind the fact that civilian casualties have to be kept at minimum and humanitarian aid to Gaza Strip should flow unhindered. On that note, thank you so much, all my friends, for having joined me in this conversation. Short break, live in breaking continues on the other side.
Motorola, India's best 5G smartphone brand.
Here the preparations are in full swing. How the troops are preparing for the ground battles. The tanks have been installed. The big Merkavas are here on the ground to totally wipe out the Hamas terrorists, and so does the regular briefings of the soldiers that are taking place.
QS and THE, the world's foremost university rankings organizations, have ranked Amity amongst the top 3% universities globally, making it among the very few Indian universities to be included in both rankings. Yet another top ranking for Amity University.
From the Delhi studios of Republic TV, it's time for Arnab Goswami on The Debate.